May I call to order the 5th meeting of the Bills Committee from 8:45 to 10:45. We've only got one item on the agenda today, and that is to continue our discussion with the administration on the policy issues of the bill. Yeah, please wait till I'm finished. At the request of the Bills Committee, the Education Bureau has sent representatives to the meeting. Ms. Tanya Chen. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, at the last meeting, you made the order that by the 22nd of March, i.e. last Friday, we should submit all our written inquiries. So my understanding is on the 22nd, we would go by ordinary practice, and our secretary receive a phone call from the Secretariat that the submission has to be CC to the Bills Committee. I find it strange because my submission was addressed to the Bills Committee, and why must it be CC copied to all members of the Bills Committee? And Mr. Ray Chen and Mr. Ao Nok Kin had written responses to from the administration to inquiries, and they've received it, but they are not numbered or they are not on the websites. I'd like to know whether there will be formal papers of the BC. Can you communicate with the Secretary direct, because I'm not aware of them? No, Chairman, because you made the order, and I don't know whether Secretariat staff were not too clear, because it's not just me. Some other colleagues have received the phone call to say that we must photocopy all our submissions to all members of the BC. I don't know whether we have to do that in all Bills Committee in the future. Please inspire me. Please give me some insight. I don't know why we are asked to do so, because I've checked whether the Bills Committees, and I found out that inquiries are not required to be copied to other members, and all those submissions were numbered. I'm not trying to put the Secretariat staff in a difficult position. Well, those staff members were very conscientious. They gave us a few calls urging us to photocopy the letter to all members. So I don't know whether there is a communication breakdown between yourself and the Secretariat staff, or the Secretariat staff or me. And then I submitted my inquiries before the deadline. However, they are not tabled, and I don't know whether they would be numbered. Now, if in future our submissions are not numbered, does that mean that they will not form part of the records of the Bills Committee? And are you changing history? And if we are not a member of the BC, do we have to join a public hearing in order to give you our views? Because even submissions from members of the public are numbered, but not ours. Your question is quite clear. In order not to take up too much time, can the Secretary give us a succinct answer? Let me clarify first. We have not got any instruction from the Chairman. We just want to ensure or to clarify with what officers of members whether they wanted us to CC all submissions to all members of the BC. If so, we would want that a clear statement. If the response was no, we would not ask for the same to be done again. All right, can the Secretary remind us? where can we find Mr. Alnokin and Mr. Ray Chan's submissions sent in last week or last month or at the last meeting, because they were tabled? Would they be numbered? And how about mine? My submissions are not numbered, and that means members cannot access them from the website. Does that mean that I have to CC them every time to members? Our instruction is to put them on the website. If you couldn't find it last night on the website, I apologize. Perhaps we were a bit too slow. For sure, it can be found this morning. No, I just checked this morning. Please clarify whether it is unique with this BC. Even though we've addressed our submissions to the chairman, that's not good enough. We have to cease it to all members of the BC. Will that be a standard practice for all BCs in the future? I just want to clarify what is happening. That is already clarified. No. I want to know whether it is unique to this BC, whether we have a special arrangement for this BC or for all BCs in the future. If it is the latter, we'll have to write to Mr. Chen Wei on to see whether that indeed is the case. Do you know whether this is standard practice for all BCs? I want to know why it is the case. No, we don't have really standard practice. We just wanted to ascertain. How about ordinary times? Won't you send it out to all members? And I don't know why my office received a few phone calls from the secretariat. I'm not trying to duplicate their workload. I just want to clarify so that I can lessen their workload. Time for questions. Mr. Alnokin. Chairman, if not for those controversies last time, we wouldn't have so much concerns. Now, I think it is good if the secretariat can upload my letter to the website. No, it's not that they are not going to do so. No, I'd like to know whether our written inquiries to the administration will be uploaded to the website. Well, according to my understanding, that's the case. All right, we start our discussion on policy issues. As I said, at the request of the BC, the Education Bureau has representatives present. And if members would like to ask questions, please press the request to speak button. And may I remind members, I have read the oral and written questions from members, and they are very repetitive. I hope members will not repeatedly ask the same questions. And questions are for the next stage, i.e. for the clause-by-clause stage, should not be asked here. Here we are discussing the policy aspect of the bill. Mr. Gary Van, 3 minutes. Questions and answers included. 3 minutes. The bill requires the national anthem to be included in the secondary and primary education, and schools are required to teach students the national anthem and also the etiquette for singing and playing the national anthem. We're worried about the autonomy of the education sector here and also enforcement in schools. So for Part 4, Clause 9, inclusion in primary and secondary education, I'd like to know whether that is a mandatory provision. Secretary, can I defer to Madam Choi, the Under-Secretary for Education? And before that, let me clarify one point. By means of local legislation to implement national law, it is our constitutional duty. We have to fully reflect the policy intent and requirements of the national law, and therefore there is the requirement to teach the national anthem in primary and secondary schools. So we have the provision here.
Regarding the actual mechanism and implementation, we will enforce that under the current education system. We've taken into consideration the requirement of the national anthem law, the local legal system, and the circumstances of Hong Kong. I hope members will note this point. I will now ask the Undersecretary to answer the question in relation to the educational aspects. To answer Mr. Fan's two questions and his two concerns, his first concern is education autonomy, and secondly, the enforcement of the law in schools. First of all, the spirit of the bill is that we hope that the schools will educate their students to respect the national anthem and to have a basic understanding, and therefore it has nothing to do with educational autonomy. So when and how when the school should educate the students, it's for the schools to decide. The school is a premises for students to be educated, and it will provide an opportunity for students to be educated about the national anthem. So there's no penalty. I'm sorry, you've not answered the question whether or not Clause 9 in Part 4 is a mandatory, provision. If the teacher fails to teach the students to sing the national anthem or to understand the spirit and intent of the national anthem, will the Bureau compel the school to do so and to punish the school or even dismiss the headmaster and the teachers? I think, could you give a concise answer? I think earlier on I've already answered that question. So Clause 9 compels the Secretary of Education to incorporate the national anthem into primary, secondary education. So the Secretary of Education should issue such, orders, but he should do so under the education system. Tanya Chan. I'd like to ask questions similar to the written question I submitted earlier because I don't see it tabled today. According to the
committee 咧就有一個general comments 嘅，咁咧就係第34，咁咧特別係針。
That is, Section 34 is not really targeting the national anthem bill, but it sets that certain provisions of the law would affect our freedom of expression. Under the general comment 34, it says, first of all, the laws should have sufficient precision, and secondly, restraining our freedom of expression is only allowed when national security and public order are affected. So I'd like to ask how this national anthem bill would satisfy those two requirements. For example, if someone doesn't sing the national anthem in a proper way, how would that affect national security and public order? Thank you. Since we only received Ms. Chen's question at a rather late stage, we've not been able to provide a written answer. But in CP 2893/1819 bracket 2, on the second page, regarding the Ng Sok Kung Siu case, we already provided a detailed answer. When the CFA considered a case involving the insulting of a national anthem, a judgment was made stipulating that the national flag, like the national anthem, the national flag and the national anthem are designated symbols of the country. So in respect of the CFA ruling regarding the national flag, it also applies to the national anthem. The judgment said that the PRC, the society of the PRC, including the Hong Kong SAR, and in the entire country, we have the legitimate right to protect the dignity of the national anthem, and any insult to insulting the national flag and national anthem is a criminal offense, and restraining the freedom of speech will be justified. In the end, the CFA concluded that such limited restraint on such freedom is only restrictions on certain forms of expression. That is, insulting the national flag that would not encroach on the protection of the freedom of expression. Which page of that ruling regarding the Ng Chung Kyu case are you referring to? Yes, I can do that. Perhaps you can, enlighten Ms. Chan later. Mr. Leung Yu Chung. I'd like to ask the Education Bureau to explain this one point. The bill provides for the Secretary of Education to promote the education of the national anthem. We heard just now that the Secretary will issue guidelines, but there will not be penalties. But if the students were to violate the spirit of the national anthem or does not observe the proper etiquette or deliberately insult the national anthem, what can the school do? Of course, I do not agree that there should be any sanctions. But how can the teacher cope with such a scenario? I think that question has been asked earlier, but I would like the Secretary to answer anyway. Well, as teachers and educators, we heard just now that the Secretary will incorporate the education of national anthem into primary and secondary education. This follows the teaching and learning process. In the course of teaching the students, if the students cannot learn the national anthem, or then we would need to guide the students to do better. If the member is concerned that during class or during school activities you have some naughty students who would bully others, for example, I believe that in the schools we have counselors, and also the teachers would be able to make a professional judgment. So the court will not be like a court or a place where the law is enforced. Well, I've been a teacher for more than 30 years. So sometimes we may need to decide whether we need to punish a student when they, for example, use foul language and so on. But national anthem is different. If a student will embark on certain behavior deliberately, for example, insulting behavior which is insulting to the national anthem, and he doesn't, improve even after he has been told to do so, what would be your guideline? Will there be any mandatory sanctions? Of course, we're talking about promotion here, and I don't think it should be mandatory. So what exactly is the direction of your guidelines? We said just now that in every school, in every teacher and student, I think the situation is different. So we do not have actually, one size fit all direction. Well, I would like to ask members to please, be more concise and specific with the question. According to Part 4, Clause 9, we need to promote the national anthem in the education in primary secondary schools. With this bill in place, how would it be different? I mean, for the schools when dealing with the national anthem at the moment? In kindergartens, in the curriculum for primary, secondary, and schools and kindergartens, there is already provision for the learning of the national anthem, and also there are activities for the students to learn to sing the national anthem. So the teacher should be familiar with that. So whether we have this bill or not, I don't think it will make any practical difference, except that we have to respect our constitutional duty. Regarding the penalty, if you do have students who don't respect the national anthem, is it for the school to decide how to deal with that student? I think that is already a repetition. I think I've already said that the school is a place where we educate the students. So the duty of the school and of the teachers is that we hope the students learn to respect the national anthem. Mr. Au Lok Hin. Thank you. On the subject of education, we are worried as to whether or not the school sponsoring bodies, they may not comply with the provisions in this bill. Would that result in the school, in your government, invoking the education ordinance to regulate the schools, whether it's primary, secondary schools or international schools? Madam Choi, the Undersecretary, could perhaps clarify this. That is, when you have a school sponsoring body which the government considers not having complied with the national anthem law, although the bill said that the school has the obligation to teach the national anthem. So eventually, would you have any measures to deal with such schools? I think that question is seriously repetitive already. I'll start first. Chairman, Mr. Au asked whether the education ordinance will regulate the schools. I think that question has been asked many times. In the local legislation for the national anthem, law, for the national law, we are actually reflecting the requirement of the national anthem law. That is, we need to educate the national anthem in schools. The secretary will need to issue, directions as to how specifically the anthem should be taught. First of all, this is already being done in primary, secondary schools, and when we teach national anthem and other subjects, we would use the same mechanism in schools, and we already have an existing mechanism in place. So I think what Mr. Au is asking is whether in the current education ordinance, what are the requirements, and if something should go wrong, what provisions we will invoke. Chairman. In order to avoid any misunderstanding, let me put it this way. Now, legally the government may not do it, but after the bill becomes law, and if the school sponsoring body doesn't follow the directions of the Education Bureau in operating the school, then there will be certain restrictive measures provided for in the education ordinance. I'm saying that legally this is a scenario that might arise. I understand other members have also raised a similar question, but anyway, Mr. Ray Chan, Chairman. I was attending the PWSC meeting, so we were discussing a point of procedure at the beginning of the meeting, and I heard that the clerk saying that the government's response to our questions will be put onto the website. But this time I found a memo, for Ray Chan. It would appear that if I want to CC my paper to other members, it's my own personal decision. So I think this time we seem to have deviated the normal practice. Is it because the clerk is too busy to put the papers onto the website? But anyway, other than that, I would like to come back to the bill. I asked a similar question before. That is, when the national anthem is being played, if somebody doesn't sing aloud or stand, solemnly, would that be a breach? And the answer is no. I asked then, when an oath is being taken during a ceremony, if someone is not present on the occasion, would that be a breach? The government said that if you have, electoral members designate who does not intend to insult the national anthem or to express a political opinion, and if he is absent from the ceremony where the national anthem is played, And if there's a reasonable excuse, he doesn't think that there's any problem with that. So that's the government's answer.
Now, I'd like to put it back in the context of the community. This bill is very different from the national flag and national emblem bill ordinance. Can you list out all the offenses to clarify for the community? For instance, boycott of the playing of the national anthem, would that be regarded as an insult to the national anthem? If openly appeal to others to boycott the national anthem singing ceremony, is that an offense? For instance, I know that the national anthem would be played at this football match. I urge members of the public to be late or to be 15 minutes late. Is that a problem? And if person A appeals to other spectators to join a football match late by 15 minutes. And some may say in response that I support your appeal because I don't like the national anthem and I want to be late for the ceremony. Would that be regarded as an insult to the national anthem? I've never seen how have never seen criminal sanctions for boycott. Appeal to others to boycott. I ask the administration to answer. Is it a breach of Clause 7? I've said a number of times that there must be the act and publicly and purposely insult. Well, in all things, we have to consider the evidence, whether the DFJ and also the court, they can only judge based on facts. Mr. Ray Chen asked, second question, well, we have the common law system in Hong Kong, so incitement in Hong Kong is a criminal offense. Can you wait for the second round, please? Mr. Alvin Young? My question is for the Undersecretary for Education regarding education. Now, what about the history of the national anthem? Does the Bureau think that the whole history of the national anthem and all persons involved should form part of the education process? Madam Choi, the spirit and history of the national anthem. Well, in different subjects, in different areas, the national anthem is involved. It is the teacher's professional judgment to decide materials to be taught depending on the objective of the lesson. So the Bureau will not dictate how schools choose the materials for teaching. Now, given that there is no framework, if some schools deliberately omit teaching students the history, some of the history, and people involved in the national anthem, will that be a breach of Clause 9? As I said, we only provide a framework and also guidelines. And then it is the professional autonomy of teachers to decide materials and content to be included. We will not dictate the materials used. Will only consider whether the materials taught are correct or not. So, according to the Undersecretary, they're going to be very lenient. They will allow schools and frontline teachers to have their own decision. Of course, we welcome and appreciate this. But I'd like to know, how will Clause 9 be activated? That is, under what circumstances will the Secretary for Education issue guidelines or warn or urge schools to do this and not to do that, etc.? Undersecretary. I think Mr. Young doesn't know our curriculum well. As I said, at different stages of education, there can be different perspectives and content in learning the national anthem. The overall objective is to teach our children to learn to respect the national anthem. In KG, on a personal and social level, that is to teach students to understand and respect their identity as member of the nation. And in primary school, Chinese culture is part of the curriculum. So students will learn about their country through stories. And in junior secondary, in Chinese history, we have relevant content in the curriculum. Depending on the stage of development of students and the needs of education, teachers are given the freedom to choose what to teach. So there is no question of right or wrong. It's just whether it is appropriate or not. What about directions to be issued by the Secretary for Education? Mr. Wang Tingguang. Clause 9 of the bill has aroused concerns among some of the members here. Prior to the handover, when the British were ruling Hong Kong, what about the national anthem, God Bless the Queen of the UK? How was it different in terms of education and promotion of the God Save the Queen? Well, I once was an EPA teacher. I was asked to teach junior secondary students to learn about the governance and governing structure of Hong Kong. And as for the the British national song, well, when the TV God Save the Queen, when at night before the TV stations closed, they played the song as well. What about teachers back then? When the God Save the Queen was played, were students required to understand the song, and was there any requirement as regards students' attitude? As far as I know, there was no similar legislation or no such legislation. Mr. Ao-Nok-Kin, I was at a PWSC meeting. We were discussing collusion between the government, the business sector, and the rural figures in relation to Wang Chao. It was a big issue. Now, I heard that in order to submit submissions, we have to state clearly that the submission must be CC to all members. Well, that question was already answered. It was asked by Ms. Tania Chen, so I don't want to take up time of this BC. Well, can you give me back the time? Because I checked with members, I was told that there was no reply. Well, that was already answered. All right, I go to my questions. Regarding the national anthem, during the colonial days, I was born here and I grew up here. There was no legislation at all. From primary to secondary school education, I have to say that there was never once when God Save the Queen was played, not even once. When Red Fusion TV station, well, when it closed for the day, the song would be played. And we made fun of the lyrics by secondary creation. I'm sure you've all heard the lyrics, meaning that everyone was begging so and so forth. You must have heard it. No, I've never. Perhaps your life circle is very different from mine. Well, the Queen was called the boss, and I think the colonial officials found it funny too. All right, turning back to the education of the national anthem, Clause 9 said that there must be inclusion of national anthem in primary and secondary education. No mention was made of universities. Of course, you dare not do that because universities have academic autonomy. On the one hand, you say that it's not included in university education, and then on the other hand, you say that in a university, whether it be students or lecturers, everything in the national anthem bill will apply to them, and they can be caught inadvertently at any time. So is my understanding correct or not? Please be brief. Secretary, well, I'm going to be very quick. First, Ms. Claudia Mo drew a comparison between the colonial days and Hong Kong as an essay after the unification. No, I wasn't. That was not a comparison. It was Wong Ting Kwong who started it. Well, the national anthem, the national law requires the inclusion of the national anthem in primary and secondary school, so we have to add it in our local legislation. And if primary and secondary school children are already taught national anthem, by the time they reach university, they should have a respect for the anthem. Dr. Choi, we said that we want to teach students to respect the national anthem. So regardless of who you are and on what occasions, we hope that you will be law-abiding. And of course, that applies to university students. Mr. Nok-hin, second round, 3 minutes. Well, I grew up in the 1990s, and in the education sector, there was never anyone who taught us to sing God Save the Queen. There was a Chinese history teacher who taught us the national anthem of the Chinese, the Republic of China. So I find something difficult to explain in terms of policy, and I have included that question in my letter to the Bureau. Now, I will not be further bogged down by the procedural matters under Clause 18. In its reply dated the 15th of March, I'm sure you've got it too, Chairman. So, a national law promulgated, if it has got any impact on Hong Kong, there would be discussion by the LegCo before it is to be included into Annex 3. And in 1999, in reply to an oral question by Mr. Martin Lee, when any law already included into Annex 3 of the law with impact on Hong Kong will be discussed by the Council. Now, you already asked that question orally and written, and you are repeating again. No, I'm asking you to, I'm commenting. All right, question 2. So there is at least a fundamental principle for national laws to be implemented in Hong Kong. Now, if the policy intent and also the common law systems in Hong Kong should be taken into account. So the policy intent and how it is to be set as a local legislation, well, it's not easy. for the national anthem, they will ask people to sing the national national emblem to express their patriotic feelings. But it's not here, and I don't know the reason why you have already deleted that, and I fail to understand the principle.
I will not allow your first question because it's been asked 3 times already. Mr. Au, in my reply to Mr. Au's question, I said that we are, by way of local legislation or promulgation, it will be different. I understand what I'm saying, that your standards have changed compared with the situation in 1999. Why did you let him answer the question first? I think Mr. Au is correct. For the national laws, we have to ask them about the intent of the national legislation, which will then be reflected in our local legislation, bearing in mind the local legal system and the circumstances. In the process, we have strictly followed that principle. And therefore, whether it's in the preamble or in the text of the bill and the wordings that we've chosen, we've already borne that in mind. And the deliberation of the Bills Committee has given us the opportunity to explain why we adopted such, a drafting approach. You ask as whether or not there's any mechanical or rigid principle, obviously not. We all, exercise common sense. After the scrutiny of the bill, then we can decide whether or not we are able to comply. Why don't you let him answer the question? If you're willing to, change. Ms. Alvin Young, Chairman, I'd like to ask Madam Choi, the Under Secretary, this question. In the process of teaching the national anthem, do we also need to teach the spirit of communism? Would there be such guideline or direction? In Clause 9, we're talking about the history and spirit of the national anthem, the etiquette to be observed, and also the playing and singing of the national anthem. So the answer is no, right? Just give me a simple yes or no answer. If we go to Clause 9, this is clearly stipulated here. So the history and spirit of the national anthem, the etiquette for playing and singing the national anthem. It does not mention the other aspects that Mr. Young referred to. For example, how it should be taught, and the details to which we should go into is the subject to discretion of the teachers. In the course of teaching the national anthem, I'd just like to confirm that there is no need to teach the spirit of communism. That is our understanding. Because the students know too much about the history of the national anthem, including what happened during the Cultural Revolution and what happened to the composer. And if the students become too familiar with the history, in the end they end up not respecting the national anthem. How would the Bureau deal with that? We've already heard that refer to the basic understanding of the national anthem, the depth and the breadth of the area to be covered when teaching the national anthem. As to how the students will feel after they've learned the national anthem, there is no requirement here under the Clause 9. So does it mean that the Bureau will not do this? Just because the students know too much about the history of the national anthem, they will not, and as a result, they engage in activities which are not respectful of the national anthem. The school will not be held responsible. I think there are many factors affecting the students' behavior as teachers. Just because the students know too much or not enough for the national anthem, we will not just consider that, because the behavior of the students are, affected by many factors. As I said in Clause 9, we do not require the school to show the results of the students' learning. I think if you read Clause 9 carefully, you'll find that understanding the national anthem and its history and other historical incidents. Now, in the course of teaching the national anthem, given the free flow of information, people can learn about the background through different channels. And the teachers should, lead the students in a professional manner and teaching how to respect the national anthem. Whatever our own opinion, we should all respect the national anthem. Dr. K.K. Kwok. Well, I was attending the other meeting in the other room, but I'd like to raise an issue. That is, we submitted some questions on the 22nd, and we asked the government to reply to our questions. Obviously, we have not received those answers. In our discussion, I think for example, the intent of the bill will depend very much on our understanding of the government's policy. Later on, I will be asking my question on the subject of education, but so the question I'm going to ask is premised on the government's answers, but we have yet to get the answers. The government's answer has not helped us understand the intent of the law. So to further understand that, does it mean that we have to go elsewhere for help? All the written questions submitted before the 22nd of March have already been forwarded to the Education Bureau, and they will give a written reply. But they're not able to, finish, answering those questions in time. I hope they can do it as soon as possible. Now, when the Education Bureau has given us their answers, like last time, we will distribute both the questions and the answers to all members of the committee. The clerk will also post both the questions and the answers onto the website. I agree, but if there are further questions, they cannot further clarify in writing. Yes, sir, you may, direct questions to them. But if I send my questions to them, the other members may not know. You can also circulate your own questions to other colleagues. That's your own prerogative. Chairman, to scrutinize a bill, I thought the approach is that the government's answer should help facilitate our discussion. Let's say if a member asks a question, I might also want to know the answer. But if there's no further answers from the administration, then I wouldn't know, in which case I have to keep on asking questions. I'm asking a technical question. Well, I'm sorry, I already made a decision. Well, this has to do with our, practical operation. Chairman, I think this is has to do with a point of order. The way you deal, would you want me to, all right? You can certainly show me the rules of procedure. I just don't want to take up, the questioning time by members. Dr. Fernando Joe, Chairman. Why don't we first clarify this rather important arrangement? If you set a deadline, I've already made a decision pursuant to Section 44 of the Rules of Procedure. Please, if you have a question, please ask your question now. Of course, I have a question. Then please go ahead. But I think we need to resolve that issue. It's already been resolved. I already made a decision. Chairman, you may not like my decision, but I've already made it. Chairman, you may take it that I'm asking a question regarding point of order. It's either about a point of order or not. Okay, through you, I'd like to ask the clerk this question. I understand that the chairman is entitled to make a decision which is final, and you have the authority to chair the meeting. But as chairman, and when you chair a meeting, and us being the members, if we want to raise questions and writing to the administration. Do we as members have that right? If the chairman sets a deadline, and deadline means that we lose that prerogative after deadline, is that compatible with the rule of procedure? Well, that has been asked over and over again. I already made my decision after I allow members to speak. And I'm not saying that you don't have the right to ask written question. I was saying that you should not treat the secretary as a post box, and that you should direct your questions to the policy bureau. I've already made a decision. I will not allow any discussion, further discussion. Tanya Chen, your second round. Well, that decision was made by myself and not the clerk. Tanya Chen. Chairman. Let me come back to the national anthem. First of all, I'd like to further clarify one point. Mr. Yip is with us today, but I still like to put this to the clerk. You, according to which article in the basic law, where does it say that the national anthem and the national flag should be in parallel? I was talking about Section 41 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. Well, I've actually studied the basic law many times. I thought he was referring to the basic law. I thought you were referring to basic law. You refer to clause 10. I look at it. I read it several times. There's only reference here to the national flag, but it doesn't mention national anthem. I don't know why he should make that. He should mention that. So is that a new constitutional order? Regarding the Kong Xiu case, it has to do about the flag, the national flag. One paragraph of the judgment said insulting the national flag is a form of expression. The person will have to, send out a message of protest, but the message may not be very clear. But when we talk about the national anthem, especially matters where strict liability are involved, the restriction would exceed that of the national flag. The 5 justices are of the opinion that it will, impose quite, considerable restrictions on our human rights, and then and certain criteria need to be met before that's justified. And subsequently, the case of Leung Kok-hong was heard in the High Court. So I'd like to know, first of all, the national anthem law, how is it compatible with the UN requirements, including the need for sufficient precision, and whether it has to do with national security or public order, and if it has to do with public order, the Leung Kok-hong case was particularly in respect of public order. So I'd like to ask how the bill is compatible with that. So the beautiful thing is that if I know the government's answer, then I can, So I think the time is up. Why is it that sometimes we hear questions at the meeting, we ask our questions, and through the clerk, you say the secretary is the post box? I don't understand. Why is it the public cannot know? That is, having heard the answers, they can. There's yet a further reply from government. I don't see why people cannot read that. Well, if you ask a question here, why is it not part of the record? Why is it that our written questions cannot be part of the record? Why is it that our follow-up to the government's reply cannot be part of the record? Ms. Chen, I think you've already overrun. Ms. Tanya Chen's question. Could the administration provide a written answer to her questions? Will the public have access to those answers? You can certainly, if they give us a written reply, we can certainly post it onto the website.
Well, if I'm lucky enough, I will be able to ask a question, but I might not have the opportunity to ask follow-up questions. Ms. Tanya Chen, I think you're going back to the same old question. I've asked him to give you a written reply. Then how can I go into my third round? Dr. K.K. Kwok. Well, Chairman, it's a waste of breath to argue with you. The Secretary quoted Article 132 of the Constitution. Do you know what it is about? The People's Supreme Court is the supreme judging organization. So that means you don't really have to resort to the Court of Final Appeal in Hong Kong. We are now discussing the national anthem. And then the Secretary quoted the national constitution, that is an end to one country, two systems. When you talked about A, they refer to B. We understand that 141 of the constitution has not been quoted. Your logic is harming Hong Kong, damaging Hong Kong. On the basis of one country, two system, the basic law is here to protect Hong Kong. Otherwise, all people would have fled because they can be accused of subverting the government and causing trouble here. The Supreme People's Court is the highest court. Since when can we quote the Constitution of the PRC to interpret Hong Kong laws, including the National Anthem Bill? I will invite the Undersecretary to the PS to supplement. You have to understand the constitutional order and arrangement. No, the one sitting next to you asked me to quote Section 141 of the Constitution. Please do no dialogue between members of the Council here. Well, we have the Basic Law and the SAR because of the Constitution. The Constitution will then govern the laws of Hong Kong. So can the PS please supplement? I was responding to a question by a member. After the enactment of the National Anthem Bill, what would be its applicability to some of the laws in Hong Kong? And according to the CFA, after the handover, Hong Kong has come into a new constitutional order that was clearly pointed out by a judgment of the CFA. The CFA quoted from the Constitution, national flag is a symbol and sign of the nation, and therefore it must be protected. And I use that as drew an analogy. The national flag and national emblem and national anthem are symbols of the nation, and they should be given the same level of protection. Under Article 80 of the Basic Law, it is clearly stated that all levels of courts in Hong Kong shall be the judiciary of the region, exercising the judicial power of the region. Well, why have you suddenly quoted 141 of the Constitution? Dr. Fernando Zhang, the Undersecretary, said that under the law, schools are required to teach students the national anthem, and that is the spirit of the national anthem. May I ask the Undersecretary to inspire me on the spirit of the national anthem, the history and spirit of the national anthem? Well, the spirit is about solidarity and also bring together the feelings of the people for the country. I think that's the most important part. Well, that involved the preamble of the bill to for the promotion of the dignity of the national anthem. I think the spirit is to respect the country, to respect the symbol of the country. All right. I'd like to ask what is the Education Bureau's interpretation of the country? What do you mean by the country? PLC. So what represents the country? The government, or the Chinese Communist Party, or the Chinese race? Well, all included, and the geography and also history and culture also included. Dr. Zhang, when teaching primary and secondary school children, do we have to teach everything about the history? And should they be taught to respect and love all these things and concepts related to the country? Well, all these can can be materials for teachers to choose from, and based on the needs of students, teachers can choose from these materials. We do not dictate what materials they use. We do not have any specific requirements. I just want to clarify this point, which is very important. Respect for the national anthem, which is a symbol of the country or the nation. I'd like to know whether nation represents a ruling party or geography or a race or culture. All these are very important. Under the National Anthem Bill, we have the education policy. Now, if the policy is to require students to love the ruling party, then this is wrong. So I'd like to know whether primary and secondary school children will be taught to love the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. Well, as I said, at different stages of education, there is teaching of the national anthem, learning the Chinese culture, learning about their identity, respect different lifestyles and different cultures, to learn everything related to the country's history, geography, related to the national anthem, to respect the national anthem, and they should understand the country and the place where they live in, and to enhance their sense of belonging. Regarding awareness of the ruling party, that is part of the education, but for feelings and emotions, I think there can be differences among students. For members who would want to ask questions, please do so as soon as possible. Ms. Claudia Mo, second round. Thank you, Chairman. I'm afraid that Dr. Choi, as the Undersecretary for Education, is not too clear about educational values, because true patriotism is defending the land and culture of your nation to ensure that they will not be invaded by a brutal political force. So I don't think you are able to answer this question. Can you repeat it again? As I said, the bill requires students to learn the spirit and history of the national anthem and learn how to sing it and to respect the etiquette. We have not dictate how teachers choose teaching materials. Political convictions and views would not be included in the education process. So we should allow our students to learn in an objective manner. This is really a parroting. So my question for Mr. Patrick Nip. I was not really asking. I was telling him my personal experience, and he said very loudly that to draw a comparison between God Save the Queen and the national anthem bill here is not appropriate. I never said that it was appropriate. It was a question by Mr. Wong Ting Kong. He asked what it was like in the colonial days, and the secretary did not answer that question clearly. Now you should not display partiality when you answer questions. When government-friendly members ask you questions, you did not protest. When I commented on the situation in the British colonial days, you said it was not appropriate. I think this kind of favoritism is really too ugly to see. Well, some foreign journalists have asked this, and I've also helped them to say this.
Legislate respect in this regard. 唔該，局長。
好啊，
係局長。
多謝主席啊，每
Secretary, let me clarify first, Ms. Claudia Mo. Whoever, regardless of who asked the questions in this council, myself and my colleagues will do our utmost to answer these questions. And I gave you that feeling. I apologize. And I was talking about a comparison. I was talking about two different scenarios as a British colony and also an SAR under the PRC. Regarding local legislation of the national anthem law, there are two important points. First, to respect the national anthem, and for penalties. Now, if there are insulting acts openly and purposely, they should be punished. So we are legislating to prohibit such unacceptable behavior, and I think we have similar laws in Hong Kong to achieve such a purpose. Dr. Zheng. Well, this question might be out of the context, but the national anthem has seen a few versions and amendments in the history of the country. In one version, there was mention of communism. Refer to the leadership of the Grand Communist Party. That was the version used before 1979, before we had the opening up and reform of the country. So the lyrics of the national anthem could be amended, assuming that they again revert to the pre-1979 version. Will that be in breach of the basic law? And that is communism will not be practiced in the Hong Kong SAR, because that can happen. And where there was a press briefing on the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance, and 9 offences are now removed, and also only offences that are liable to conviction to imprisonment of 3 years will such offences be included. I don't know whether it is 3 or over 3 years. Anyway, I asked a similar question last time. assuming that a Hong Kong resident do not commit an act to insult the national anthem, maybe in Qatar or in Guangzhou, because there were occasions when Hong Kong residents booed the national anthem in Guangzhou. Now, assuming that this really happens, now, if that person hasn't been arrested in Guangzhou and he has returned to Hong Kong, and as a result of the amended FOO and the national anthem ordinance, will that person be requested to be removed to Guangzhou because of his booing the national anthem?
Answer Mr. Cheng's question. First of all, the national anthem. The local legislation is based on the decision of the NPCSC, that is to include the national anthem law into Annex 3 of the Basic Law. So the national anthem is the one referred to in the national anthem law. And secondly, you asked about an offense committed outside of Hong Kong, and you refer to the Fugitive Ordinance, surrender of fugitives. All the offences proposed does not include the offence of insulting the national anthem. And thirdly, in the local legislation, in the bill itself, only when there is a deliberate attempt to insult the national anthem, the offence may attract a maximum imprisonment of 3 years. Tanya Chen, your third round, 2 minutes. Chairman. Well, I didn't ask that many questions last time, but this time you are cutting down my time to 2 minutes. You just want to, go ahead with the clause by clause as soon as you can, possible. I'd like to ask the PS to further elaborate. You talk about CB bracket 2. Which paper were you referring to? Because we have not, Chairman, I just like to confirm. Permanent Secretary, this is a question for the Permanent Secretary, yes. I think we've answered the question many times. But anyway, I still need to confirm. I have no intention to use up your time. I'm referring to CB2 893 1819. This is our reply to a question from the Bills Committee's legal advisor's question, and this is the first reply. And the Ng Kong Siu case I cited is on page 6. Okay. Are we looking at paper 893, bracket 01? 01? Bracket 02. Bracket 02. All right. In respect of another answer, CB 299/1819, there is one item on clauses 9 and 10. Clause 10, it's about communication authority, and the last paragraph of 1617 is that the community authority may, impose appropriate penalties for local television and sound broadcasting licensees when broadcasting, APIs and so on. We have, a mechanism in place, and there is no deliberate violation or non-compliance. So regarding the word deliberate, it would appear to be the mens rea for an offense. So in clause 10 of the bill, you say there's no penalty. Then let's go back to the original provision regarding the regulation of broadcasting. Is it the case that you also need to prove the mens rea here? Chair, I think the mens rea is required. Which clause are we looking at, please? Chairman, I can provide the answer in writing. I think you've already overrun your 2 minutes. Can you go for your 4th round? Mr. A. Chan, Your second round, 3 minutes. Thank you. In my earlier round, I asked the government a question regarding the boycotting of the playing of the national anthem and similar acts and whether or not that would be a breach. And your immediate reply was that you've never heard that such boycotting act is an offense. I'm asking this question on behalf of the public. If the government gives such a clear answer, it's a good thing. Now, the purpose of my question is that I understand that the law cannot exhaust what it would constitute an insult, and hence you have other insulting acts. Now, through our deliberation, I would like the government to tell the public clearly what would constitute an insult and what would not. The government's reply is not like what the chairman said. They only, cite clause 7 and say that it's very clear. I hope you give us a definitive answer whether it's yes or no. And later I appeal. I asked a question about boycott, and he in his reply he mentioned incitement. Of course, I under the common law there is an offense of incitement. Now, when people boo when the national anthem is being played, I'm no legal expert, but I am sure that would be tantamount to inciting other people to insult the national anthem. The chairman said, that if I appeal to people to enter the stadium at a later stage, would that be an insult? Mr. Chen said we cannot exhaust all possible scenarios. But one principle is very clear, especially for members of the public. So long as they respect the national anthem, then most of the provisions, they didn't worry about most of the provisions in this bill. Secondly, if they publicly and deliberately insult the national anthem, you need to look at the actual situation to see whether or not you've satisfied that threshold. For the overall majority of the public, of course, if they respect the national anthem, then I don't think they need to worry. I think Mr. Ray Chen and other members have asked questions regarding hypothetical situations. The national anthem has set the threshold at a very high level. It will require the law enforcement authorities to prove that someone has the intent to insult the national anthem, and that intent has to be proven by the law enforcement authorities. You cannot simply allege that somebody has that intent. And if members' questions were that if I have the intent to insult the national anthem and I incite people to boycott the national anthem, of course that will be an offense. But if that person doesn't have the mens rea, then it will be for the law enforcement to prove whether or not there is such a mens rea. So in other words, appealing to people to boycott the national anthem is not an offense, right? Mr. Siu Ka-chun, thank you. I'd like to clarify whether I am entitled to 4 minutes or 3 minutes for my first round. 3 minutes for the first round? Thank you. The bill, proposes that the national anthem should be incorporated into primary and secondary education. Ms. Alvin Young already asked this question earlier. That is, if you have secondary school students deliberately, commit an act which is an insult to the national anthem, the government said that they will respect the professionalism of the teacher. But if school doesn't report it, please, other people can do that. If the media reports on the behavior of that student and the public reports that to the police, then that student is like a chance that the student will be prosecuted. Even if the student were punished by the school, he or she would still be prosecuted. if the person is very patriotic, he loves Hong Kong as well, and he is seriously singing the national anthem in Cantonese. I think the same question has been asked before. And I would like the government to give us a serious answer. If someone is really patriotic and he loves Hong Kong and he seriously sings the national anthem in Cantonese, so what is your opinion on that? Dr. Fernando Zhang asked what sort of history we should teach regarding the national anthem. I don't know whether you've read this book. In 2010, a Japanese author wrote a book called, A Patriot Who Is Actually a Traitor. He said that some Chinese people did all kinds of, bad things in the name of patriotism and label people who oppose him to be traitors. So how can we ensure that in teaching, the need to be patriotic, how do we do that? I think that is really already a repetition. If anyone outside of the school, including the parents, the media, if they report on anything which happened, any illegal behavior which take place within the school, I'm sure the law enforcement will need to deal with that. Secondly, regarding the singing of the national anthem in Cantonese, I've answered the question many times already. If anyone can only sing the national anthem in Cantonese, that act in itself would not be a breach of any of the offences in the national anthem law. Mr. Leung Yu Chung, 3 minutes. Thank you. In answer to my question regarding the directions, you said that the questions are being repetitive, but we're all very concerned about the content of your directions. Madam Undersecretary, when you draft these directions, will you do it behind closed doors, or will you publicly consult all the stakeholders, or will you conduct a territory-wide consultation? How long will you need to do that, and what will the process be like? Again, that is a question which has been asked many times already. After LegCo has enacted the national anthem bill, the Secretary of Education will then issue directions to schools. In the process, we will liaise closely with the educational profession. And the notice of the directions is not the first time that the Bureau issues such directions. Regularly, the Education Bureau will issue guidelines regarding our education policies and the codes and guidelines that the schools have to follow. So it's not anything that is new. Well, because of that, I have to ask the following question. I think these directions are not like the other, directions, because there is a political aspect to it. Why is it the government will not publicly consult the stakeholders and to solicit the views? Undersecretary, I said that this is part of our administrative work. We work closely with the school and the frontline teachers, and we understand that the colleagues at the front line would like to receive clear guidelines, and we understand that perfectly. And we will follow the normal mechanism. There will not be any new arrangements, because we've enacted the national anthem law. You say that it's just like the other ordinary guidelines, and I don't think that is so. So you cannot do away with public consultation just because you claim you liaise closely with the stakeholders. I think other than the educators, I think the public should also be consulted. I'll be brief. Okay. The purpose of Clause 9 involved the teaching and the learning of the national anthem. Of course, the different sectors and the community may have many concerns about the national anthem law, but in the process of learning and teaching, it still falls within the realm of the teacher's professional autonomy, and therefore I don't think we need to give so many comments.
The questions has already been answered. Before we go on, I'd like to point out that this is already the 5th meeting of the Bills Committee. In terms of discussion on policy aspect, if you include the discussion at the Constitutional Affairs panel, this is the 5th meeting. We've gone through 10 hours of discussions, and then we have held 3 public hearings, and there were Q&A sessions. And I spent my whole afternoon yesterday to revise all the oral and written questions asked, and also written and oral replies by the administration. And I came to the conclusion that all the questions, including those asked today, are highly repetitive. Many of the questions were in fact related to the clause-by-clause scrutiny stage. They are not really on the policy aspect. That goes to show that we're almost done with the discussion on the policy aspect. So even if we continue for another 100 hours, they will still be repetitive. Now, if you are still not happy, then you should decide whether to support or vote down the bill or move your own amendments instead of repeating the same old questions. So I decide to end our discussion on the policy aspect by the close of this meeting, and come next meeting we will start our clause-by-clause scrutiny. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok, this is my first time, so I, on behalf of my constituency, I'd like to ask about creation on involving the creative aspect. Some ask whether secondary creation will be an insult to the national anthem. Some may say that this is not respectful enough and it may be insulting, and some say that the style may be satirical and it can also be regarded as an insult. So should the case be left for the judge to decide, or will there be guidelines for people to abide by? And assuming that there is a case or there is a creation that is considered against the national anthem bill, in the creative industry, there is a whole production team. So who will be considered in breach of the ordinance? What are the guidelines for making a decision? Definition for insult under Clause 7. We fully appreciate the concerns of the community. Although there are over 30 pieces of legislation with the concept of insult, there is no clear definition. But we have taken reference from the National Flag and National Emblem Ordinance, and also the Kong Shiu case. We have tried to provide a definition for insult under 7.8. Insult in relation to the national anthem means to undermine the dignity of the national anthem as a symbol and sign of the PRC. So to secure a conviction, the act itself is one, and the prosecution has to prove mens rea. At different stages of creation, there are different participants, and whether they are criminally liable is a judgment of facts that depends on the extent of participation and also the mens rea, i.e. the intent. Mr. Shokachan, 3 minutes. Thank you, Chairman, for pointing out that the third question in my first round has never been asked, so it is not seriously repetitive. There was no reply to question 3 yet, so can the Secretary please address it? In the mainland, that they frequently like to use this patriotic bandit. I don't know. You have read this book by a Japanese writer in 2001 on this concept. Chinese nationals may distort facts and disregard the law under the excuse of patriotism. So while we want our young people to be patriotic, how can we ensure that they will not become such persons? Well, different people may have different views of different matters. So Mr. Shiu is asking how can we teach our students to have a proper understanding. They should learn the basic facts, and respect is a very basic requirement. Patriotism is a virtue. No matter how much knowledge you have, we can't say that you will then be patriotic. People's expression differs depending on your experience, your knowledge, and people also have different virtues. So we will not require students to display some standard emotions under the ordinance. Well, what to teach and what not to teach by teachers, well, it all boils down to the spirit of the law, and as under Clause 9, to enable students to learn to sing the national anthem, to educate the students on the history and spirit of the national anthem, and on the etiquette for playing and singing the national anthem. So teaching will be entirely done and decided by professional teachers. So the Undersecretary said different people have different judgment. That's correct. And when you talked about the basic knowledge about the national anthem, what do you mean by the basic history and basic spirit of the national anthem? I already said that we would like to like people to respect the facts, and also to have feelings about the nation or the race. All right. Ms. Hanok-Kin. Chairman said that we have gone through 10 hours of discussion. So the question is not just from the Pan-Democrats. If the government is so accommodating, it should have come up with some CSAs taking on board our suggestions. But I don't see such a possibility. They say that the current bill is already very reasonable. Now, under Schedule 3, there are occasions on which the national anthem must be played and sung. Can you explain to us the rationale on deciding what occasions to be included? For instance, oath-taking ceremony of the members of the LegCo. And also major events, sports events held by the SL government. The HAB are holding more and more major events overseas teams are invited to Hong Kong, and also a World Cup match. So, what are the criteria adopted for defining major sports events? Now, once they are listed in Schedule 3, people are intimidated. They will play and sing the national anthem regardless for fear of breaking the law. Now, the match between Guangdong province and Hong Kong. Now, the national anthem is not usually sung and played on that occasion. Your question is highly repetitive. So please answer the question on what is meant by a major sporting event. During the drafting process, or from the drafting of the bill to presentation of the bill to the council, we've gone through a lot of considerations, and I think your question is really a clause-by-clause scrutiny stage question. When you asked us the principles for listing the occasions on Schedule 3, well, we have taken reference from the national anthem law, and then we have come up with this schedule. Mr. Van Yang. Chairman, you said that our questions were too repetitive and we should end our discussion on policy issue as soon as possible. I first want to raise my protest. On the 18th and also the 22nd of March, I submitted written questions. The administration has yet to reply. You may say that the 22nd was not long ago, but what about the 18th of March? I had a joint submission with Mr. Charles Mock. We must have a reply so that we have it as open record for us to monitor. The government is procrastinating, and we are asked to bear the consequence, and I have great reservation for your approach, Chairman. Please complete your questions first before I respond. A question for Dr. Choi. Will there be workshops held by the Bureau for teachers to learn to teach, how to teach the national anthem? Dr. Choi, if schools and teachers would like experience sharing from us, we are more than happy to provide the opportunity. Will the Bureau arrange for teachers to visit the mainland to learn from their peers how the national anthem is taught there? Well, we have been organizing exchange sessions and sharing sessions between teachers of the two places. Do you mean that current sharing visits already covered the teaching of the national anthem, or will there be new sessions in the future? Well, all experience sharing sessions of visions visits will based on the needs of teachers. It is not for the Bureau to arrange or to determine the themes of a visit in particular, unless the new subject is very difficult or totally new to teachers. No, you have not answered my question whether current visits already cover the teaching of the national anthem now. Now, for instance, if during a visit, the national anthem is being sung and played, our teachers will participate. But what about learning how to teach the national anthem, as in Clause 9? Oh, well, we have not required how it has to be taught. Mr. Lam Chek-ting, when national leaders conduct overseas visits, there may be a formal reception with a band playing the national anthem, but the performance may be too bad, and the national anthem is totally out of tune, and that looks ridiculous for people watching the ceremony. Of course, if it is overseas, then nothing can be done. But if in Hong Kong, there are organizations and also schools with bands playing the national anthem. They're required to play it in a solemn manner, but unfortunately, their standard is lacking. And the impression is the band is insulting the national anthem because it is played entirely out of tune. Will guidelines be issued to schools to ensure that when the national anthem is being played and sung openly, they have to fulfill certain standards in order that they will not be inadvertently caught?
But if they're not up to standard, then so be it, because people may sing out of tune and the band can also play out of tune. I think that is in respect of a particular scenario. Now, regarding the singing and the playing of the national anthem law has a simple requirement, that is to follow the lyrics and the score of the national anthem. A person is also a musical instrument. It's not that everyone can sing in a perfect pitch, or it's not just national anthem. Even the playing of a piece of music is the same. So the national anthem law doesn't say that it's an offense if the rendition is not perfect. There would need to be an intent to insult before there would be an offense. And now I defer to the Bureau to further supplement. Undersecretary, what Clause 9 requires is learning to sing the national anthem and not it's a requirement to learn the national anthem. The direction of the Education Bureau is that the national anthem should be incorporated into the primary and secondary education. Well, the PS, I'd like to repeat my question. If somebody sings it in a very bad manner, someone may say that it's an insult, but the student said it's not. He has no. So how do we prove whether or not he has that intent? So is it objective, based on the objective or subjective, criteria? I think in the event of prosecution and trial in court, the court will have to, make a judgment, based on common sense. Mr. Yip Kin Yuen. Well, in the bill, the sanctions are provided for in Clause 7, and it involves a public occasion. Education, as for education, it's touched upon in Clause 9, involving primary and secondary education. It would appear there is no sanction in respect, in the case of education. Now, sometimes a school could be a public, occasion or forum. For example, during a graduation ceremony or an open day, then the school could be, a public, could become a public forum. In that case, it's possible that the school may be punished if it were in breach of the section Clause 7. So what I'd like to know is that under what circumstances would the school be regarded as a public place, and therefore the sanctions in Clause 7 would be invoked? Yes. I think regarding Clause 7, I'll ask Mr. Nip to answer that question. As for Clause 9, it requires schools to incorporate the national anthem into their education. Anyone, according to my understanding, is that if anyone, I think Hong Kong is a place where we have the rule of law and everyone has to abide by the law. And Clause 9 doesn't provide for any sanctions or requirements. Mr. Yip refers to ask whether or not there are any premises where people don't need to follow the law. I didn't say that. Why don't you let the Undersecretary answer the question rather than engaging in a debate? Of course, Clause 9 is for Clause 9. We've said that when the school teaches the students, of course, the teachers they should teach the students in a professional manner and focus on the student. And whatever the circumstances, whether you would be in breach in Clause 7. You would need to commit an offense, be involved in a behavior that is, deliberately insulting the national anthem. My question is, under what circumstances would the school be regarded as a public place? In Clause 7, now, let me put it the other way around. You say the school is a venue for education, but I was asking whether or not it could also be a public place as well. I think you need to give the schools the confidence. Yes. The word public is not clearly defined in our laws or statutes, but in the judgments made by the courts for any occasions which could be seen by other people would be regarded as a public occasion. I'm sorry, I was attending the other meeting next door. Now, I think Madam Chair has already answered a question raised by Fernando Zhang. The more I hear the answer, I become more worried. The preamble said that the spirit of the bill is to, promote patriotism, and that means involve a consensus among the people. But unfortunately, in China, to be patriotic means that you also need to love the Communist Party, and that is not a universal standard. Neither is it a standard provided for under the common law. So in that case, there would be a question. Let's say if someone is patriotic but he doesn't love the Communist Party, he criticizes the Communist Party. For example, let's say, I think the Undersecretary already answered the question earlier. When the teacher teaches the national anthem, he has to also, explain the facts about the composer of the lyrics, what happened to him, how he was persecuted by the Communist Party during the Cultural Revolution. He was tortured and in a brutal manner. And the teacher may have to recount all these historic facts. I think that same point has been raised during the public hearing already. Anyway, well, my question is that in that case, I'd like to ask the Secretary of Education whether the behavior of this teacher would constitute an offense. Would that constitute an insult or disrespect for the national anthem? I've already said that regarding how the national anthem should be taught and the depth and breadth of the I think professionally there's no problem. I mean, I'd like to remind members that if you still want to ask questions, please press the button now. Otherwise, I will draw a line. Mr. Jonas Ho, thank you. Although I did not listen to the earlier discussions, I was listening to members in my room this morning. The ultimate question now is whether or not we admit that Hong Kong is part of the People's Republic of China. Whoever is in power in the mainland, it's a reality that it's the Communist Party which is in power. The national anthem represents our country, but does it mean that the country equals the Communist Party? That is may not necessarily be so. Through the national anthem, we learn to understand that we are a Chinese national. You can become, a member of the Communist Party or whatever political party in Hong Kong. You still have that freedom. So I don't think we need to be so worried. As for implementation, Mr. Lam Chiting asked whether or not it will be an offense if we sing the national anthem in out of tune. Well, that would depend on whether or not you're deliberately actually insulting or being disrespectful of the national anthem. Mr. Law Kun Chung gave you a live demonstration when he was taking his oath. For example, he actually, you know, took the oath in a disrespectful manner. So everyone can see that. You asked what happened if I sing the national anthem, a pitch or two higher than normal. I think the question is whether or not you are doing that deliberately. If you're not a good singer, then you can not bother. So the whole question is the intent. If we continue to drag on with such discussion, you can come up with all kinds of scenarios. The requirement is only for you to be respectful when the national anthem is played. So it's very simple. It's simply, well, all of you are university graduates. Do we still need to teach you what is the meaning of respect? We are spending so much time, and even after the chairman has made a decision, you still keep repeating these questions. I think it's a waste of time. The national anthem law is very simple and straightforward. It's not something that we should be so afraid of. If you want to challenge the law, by all means do that, and you have to face the consequence. Thank you, Mr. Ho. I don't think we need an answer to that. I propose that we extend our meeting by 15 minutes. Helena Wong, Chairman. I also have a question for the Education Bureau. In the national anthem, in the bill, it is proposed that the Educational Bureau will need to give directions regarding the teaching of the national anthem in schools, but the bill doesn't provide for the content of these directions. Does the government already have such directions in place, but it's just that they're not showing it to us? So what exactly are these directions? And secondly, I'm concerned about international schools where the students are not Chinese. Will they also need to comply with these directions to learn to sing the national anthem? So the teaching and the learning of the national anthem, in your directions, would you have specific directions for the international schools where the students are not Chinese? If the teacher has taught the national anthem but the students still cannot sing it properly or refuse to sing the national anthem, will they be punished? Undersecretary. Dr. Wong asked about our directions, and we do not have directions, showing how the national anthem should be taught. Our directions is just that we require the national anthem to be incorporated into the primary secondary education. How it's to be taught would be the decision of the school and the teachers. For international schools, we understand that in Hong Kong, there are different students of different ethnicity. So long as they incorporate the national anthem into the curriculum is fine. Regarding the outcome of the learning, Clause 9 doesn't provide for any requirements. So long as you can, so long as the students can learn to be respectful of the national anthem, know the history and background and the spirit of the national anthem. That is all which Clause 9 is requiring. The government said that there are no directions, but the directions of the Education Bureau is that the school should incorporate the teaching of national anthem. But does it mean, is it the case that there are no details? I said that Clause 9 refers to the directions by the Secretary saying that the national anthem should be incorporated into the primary secondary education. But the schools will also want to know what they need to pay attention to in following that directions. So our normal practice is that the school will issue circulars and notices to schools and to and to let the schools know. Mr. Uchiwai. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. Dr. Helen Wong's question was that according to the bill, the Secretary of Education will need to incorporate the teaching of national anthem into the curriculum. And the Undersecretary replies that it's only it requires it to be incorporated, but as to how the national anthem is to be taught, you will leave it to the professional decision of the teachers in the school.
On further questions, you said that the Secretary for Education can issue guidelines to specify the details. So I'd like to know whether the first speech was correct or the second. If the first is correct, that means after the bill is enacted, the Secretary for Education will give directions to schools on how to implement the requirements in the bill. Can you please clarify? Thank you. I will first further clarify. Clause 9 says that the Secretary for Education must give directions for the inclusion of the national anthem in the primary education and secondary education. That is a requirement under Clause 9. And after the bill is enacted, following the previous practice, the Secretary for Education would issue circulars or notices to schools to provide practical reference for schools to operate. However, there is nothing in this clause on how to teach and how to learn. That means after the bill is enacted, should be directions from the Bureau to the schools. Well, it is a circular. It is a regular practice. For instance, on application under certain schemes, we issue circulars to school to tell them what to do. Under Secretary, for the sake of record, can you give us a copy of the circular? This question has been asked by Mr. Alvin Young, a draft of the directions, right? All right. That will only be done after the bill is enacted. All our circulars and notices will be uploaded to the website, and members of the public and schools can have access to it freely. That means on how to teach students to learn the national anthem is within the professional autonomy of students. So how will the directions be issued? Can you please provide an answer in writing? Mr. Lam Chak Ting. Just now, Dr. Junius Ho followed up on my question. He talked about respect for the national anthem and law-abiding concepts. He, being a lawyer, took pictures in the court, and then he appealed to the in public that the dissidents should be killed with no mercy. I think he should reflect on that. And he said that if you can not sing properly, then you should not sing. Now, that is the crux of my question. The Secretary said that if you sing or play out of tune, it depends on whether you have the intent to insult the national anthem. And Dr. Ho said that obviously you can tell whether he has the intent. Now I think his standard is very low. If it is so easy to determine the intent, there won't be so many lawyers around. There is no need for lawyers there won't be so many lawsuits, because it is hard to use an accurate and objective way to confirm the intent of a person. We have to use the presumption or inference of a person with common sense, and it's regrettable that Dr. Ho has no understanding of this after being a lawyer for so long. And now Dr. Ho said that for people who cannot sing in tune, they should refrain from singing the national anthem. I would like to ask the secretary whether such people should really be banned from singing the national anthem. According to latest scientific research, there is a disease and the people who has got this disease cannot sing in tune no matter how hard you teach him or train him. So if a person is aware of that, he can submit a medical report as evidence. But what about people who cannot sing in tune? Will they be banned from singing the national anthem? I think I answered this question in last year and this year's public hearings. Under Clause 4 of the bill, we have the etiquette for playing and singing. Now, for those who are present on such an occasion, he has to stand solemnly and deport themselves with dignity. So the important is to show respect and dignity. So if somebody hasn't sung along, then that's fine. If he shows a respect in singing along, well, no one can be perfect, so he doesn't have to worry. And at the end of the day, it is publicly and purposely insulting the national anthem. And under the common law system, we always have this approach, evidence, and for the court to judge. As a doctor, I tell you that there is such a disease, and you have to submit medical reports to confirm that a person is suffering from this disease. Otherwise, you cannot sing properly. Otherwise, you will be caught. This is outrageous. When it comes to singing the English anthem, there is no such requirement. But we know patriotic schools will require the students to sing a communist song, The Rising Red Sun in the East, from the East. All right. Under Cap 279, the scope is very wide. Under the subvention rules, subvention can be, or subsidies can be given to primary schools. Now, it said that in future, using this code of aid for schools that have not sufficiently promoted the national anthem, aid can be withdrawn under Cap 279 Education Ordinance. Now, if a student cannot sing properly or for whatever reason, he cannot reach the very high standard required by the school or the Secretary for Education. In the most extreme case, the school can call the police, and then the person or the student can be arrested. Will this happen? The second question is simpler. Now, if a student always sings out of tune, we will try to teach him regardless, because the spirit of education is to help our students to do better. Will you call the police? Well, there are no criminal sanctions under Clause 7 because it's about teaching and learning. And Cap 278 covers all schools. Will a school lose its aid or subvention for not teaching the national anthem? Schools have to be accountable to the government, to parents, and to the community. If a school has breached the law, then under Cap 279, the Secretary of Education is empowered to exercise its role as a supervisor. If you want to pursue further, do so in writing. Dr. Fernando Cheung, I'd like to follow up on my previous question. My worry is the spirit of the national anthem is patriotism, and loving the nation may include loving the party, according to the secretary. But in my concept, loving the country is not the same as loving the ruling party. When we teach patriotism and the spirit of the national anthem, we're not teaching students to love the party as well. So once primary and secondary education is included under the bill, the secretary may issue a circular to schools. Will you specify in the circular that the teaching of the national anthem should not involve loving the ruling power and the ruling party? If you use this excuse, if the school uses this excuse to force students to love the ruling power, will you take action? This is the second time Dr. Cheung has asked this question. No, I did not say, I've not said that loving the nation and loving the party is not in clause 9. I talk about cohesion within the country, loving the nation, and respecting the country. As regards the circular, we would not have a broad brush approach in the circular on how to teach the national anthem. It all depends on the needs of the students. Now, if the school teaches students to love the party and the ruling power, what will you do? I said it depends on the needs and the ability of students. Mr. Shukajan, 2 minutes. I'm still on the same vein. If the school doesn't teach students to love the state leaders, the ruling party and the ruling power, is that respect for the national anthem? As I said, it is professional autonomy for teachers as regards the depth and width and content to be taught, so long as it suits the needs of students and that suits their ability and can teach respect, that is okay. My question is, if a school has not taught students to love the party and the ruling power, there will be no punishment. There will not be withdrawal of aid. Is that correct? I talked about teaching what is correct and accurate. So because right from kindergarten to universities, we have students, and the bill requires inclusion in primary and secondary education. At different stages in different subjects, teachers can teach things that involve the national anthem. We would not dictate the depth and also the width and content of such a teaching. My second question has not been clearly answered. I'm not talk about whether the circular will be uploaded to the website, or rather, before the circular is issued, can legislators take a look at the content? Your question has been repeated too many times, Ms. Tanya Chen. I'd like to ask whether you agree that the national anthem bill would restrict people's freedom of expression. I've answered this question a number of times. I'm asking you about this bill, yes or no. In Ng Shil Kong's case, the CFA said that there can be freedom of expression. My question is whether there is any restriction on freedom of expression. You said it is reasonable. On what basis? Now you said that because of Kong Shil's case involving the national flag and national emblem, and this is reasonable restriction of freedom of expression. But then I'm asking you whether this bill is that can satisfy the proportionality test. Members, can we have 5 more minutes? Well, there are 3 urgent questions on measles today. On measles, 3 urgent questions on measles. All right, then we will end this meeting here. There are only 2 members, Mr. Ao Nok Kin and Mr. Alvin Young. Why are there 9 members on the list? Well, the bell is ringing. All right, then the meeting is adjourned. We will start clause-by-clause scrutiny in our next meeting, but we'll allow these 2 members to ask questions first. That was after I drew the line. The meeting is adjourned. Speaker is off mic. Yes, a written reply, please. The meeting is adjourned.